Kids, you can head out. Oh, we're giving fives out. I like it, Kenny. Turn your Bibles to 2 Corinthians chapter 4. 2 Corinthians chapter 4. If you don't have a Bible, there's one in the pew back in front of you. Grab that and open up to 2 Corinthians chapter 4. Two quick announcements. Christian Surfers, they have an event on May 4th, Saturday, May 4th, men. And that we're trying to get more people involved in that. So if you want to participate, you can register online. That would be amazing. You can have you and another partner. I don't know all the details, but I think it starts at 7 a.m. Casting for Christ. Yeah, they're doing a fishing tournament. The second thing is, Christian Surfers, please, just go by the tent. I really desperately would love to start a small group out underneath the tent every Thursday night or Friday night and just see a bunch of surfers in our community come and just open the Bible and surf together, and then just see so many people come to know Jesus. So if you're interested in that ministry, just swing by that tent. I'll forget at the end of service, so I just wanted to say it up front. But 2 Corinthians 4:4. Let me read this really quick, and then we're going to jump into it. In their case, the God of this world has blinded the minds of unbelievers to keep them from seeing the light of the gospel of the glory of Christ, who is the image of God. For what we proclaimed is not ourselves, but Jesus Christ as Lord, with ourselves as servants for Jesus' sake. For God, who said, "Let light shine out of darkness," has shone in our hearts to give the light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ. Down to verse 7. But we have this treasure in jars of clay to show that the surpassing power belongs to God and not to us. We are afflicted in every way, but not crushed, perplexed, but not driven to despair, persecuted, but not forsaken, struck down but not destroyed, always carrying in the body the death of Jesus, so that the life of Jesus may also be manifested in our bodies. Last week when I was preaching, I ran out of time, and I ended in 4, but I didn't get to finish it. And so I want to kind of do a quick rehash so you understand, because this all flows together. I know there's a paragraph break, but really 7 and 8 go with 4 through 6. Last week we talked about the God of this world, and at the end of the sermon, that wasn't our main point, but we dabbled into it. And the God of this world, what we discussed last week, what he's talking about in 4:4 is Satan. It's a small g, created being, but man, he has significant power. And so when we were looking at that last week, what I was challenging so many in the room was, a lot of us have allowed Satan in our homes without even knowing it, into our jobs, into our lives, into our marriages, into our parenting. And I honestly wish someone would have had a direct conversation with me when I was a teenager regarding some of these things, because I don't think we understand the weight of spiritual warfare. I know we don't. And so when I was going through this last week, I said some things that I want to reiterate so you understand how Satan's attacking. He's the God of this age, but look how he does it. He does it by controlling our hopes. Open. Right? He controls our impulses. What do you desire? Our aims. I just need to reach this goal, right? He controls our world's philosophies, our world's psychologies. He controls the world's opinions and ideals and truisms. What's important. And you say, well, Khalil, how does he do that? Well, in Matthew 4, he's being tempted. Satan's tempting Jesus, and he says, I'll give you all of this. I'll give you all of it. And Jesus looks at him, and there's a part in that, and God has given him dominion in this earth. And so when he looks at that, if he didn't have power to give it, he wouldn't have said it. And you look at the Bible, when we walk through this, he only has a rope that's firmly fixated on the cross, and Jesus releases it every once in a while. But what we see in John 3, Satan is called the ruler of the world. 3 times in John, he's called the ruler of the world. That's a crazy thought, right? Ephesians 2:2, he's called the prince of the power of the air. 2 Timothy 2:26, the devil has captivated the senses of men. That's frightening to me. We're driven by our senses. Our five senses we're driven by. Our eyesight, what is beautiful, it drives us. And so many men know that, right? He's captivated that. And all you see is lustful pleasures, right? 1 John 5:19, he says, the whole world lies in the lap of the evil one. It's his child, essentially. He has such a stronghold in our world, and many of us don't even see it. And so what he has done, he has developed a society that has massive influence in our life, in our ideology, our modern opinions, right? The American dream. So many of us have bought into that. Our impulses that drive us. How many times have you been in life where you're like, man, that will please me? Like if I just get this, and then you get it and you're like, man, that did not satisfy. The ungodly goals we have, the things that we chase after, the view of what's right and wrong. See, Satan doesn't get in our mind and play games with us. What he does is he creates a world that lifts up pleasure and desires and glorifies sin and depravity. And so how many people, I said this last week, are slaves to their phone, right? To politics, to substances, to people's approval, to vanity, to money. And when we look at the world, it's not getting better, right? Seems like there's so much hate in the world, and there seems like there's just a push in society to remove God from all conversations. And that's his agenda. And then I talked about John 8:45. Jesus is saying, I was sent by the Father. And he says this to them. You don't believe me because I speak the truth. That's a sad thing to hear. When we can't hear truth anymore. But this morning I want you to flip over to Ephesians chapter 6. And what happens in Ephesians chapter 6, and I think all of this flows together. And the main point this morning is that we need to be humble people. In Ephesians chapter 6, listen what Paul says here. He says, put on the whole armor of God, that you may be able to stand against the schemes of the devil. So Paul says in Ephesians 6, like you gotta understand what's going on here. And right before that, he talks about marriage, and I think that's significant. He's like, every morning when you wake up, you gotta put on armor, right? Be ready for battle. And he says the devil's scheming in order to take you out. He's not your friend. He's not like playing patty cake with you. Like, if the devil's scheming against you, he's trying to win your soul. He's trying to plant a flag in your life and tell God, look, he's mine or she's mine. Look, she's wrapped up in that addiction. She don't love you. He doesn't love you. Look how he behaves. He does not love you. There's no ounce of love. And he tries to scheme against us. And what he does, he takes a little bait and puts it right in front of us. He studies us and knows what we're capable of doing. Where our sin struggle is. So if your sin struggle is power, right? He's going to put that job right in front of you. And money and prestige. And you're just going to say, oh man, that looks appetizing. Right? If people pleasing is what drives you, right? He's going to put people around that you desire their approval. And we can go down the line with that, how he tempts you. But here is what he says. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood. You may be a strong individual. You may work out a lot, right? And not another man really intimidates you. You're like, I can take him. We're not fighting against flesh and blood, something that can easily be removed from the equation. We fight against rulers, against authorities, against the cosmic powers over this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places. This is a spiritual battle. If God unveiled your eyes and you could see the spiritual realm all around you, I think you would never sleep again. It's for your soul. So our battle is not, hey, my kid needs to do right so I look good. My battle is for my kid's heart. Right? My battle is not to form my wife into what I want her to be. It's for her heart. That's what we're fighting for, the souls of men and women. That's what we're battling for, our own soul. And he says this. I love this. Therefore, take up the whole armor of God that you may be able to withstand in the evil days, and having done all to stand firm. Stand firm, therefore, having fastened the belt of truth. And then he goes on all the things that we must put on. We can't do it. We need the armor of God. Right? We need that air support. When you're down in the bunker and things go really bad, where you grab your walkie-talkie, which is prayer, and you say, hey, you got to get me out of this. And as you watch, God sends heaven's armies, and all of a sudden, you see a light to the end of the tunnel. See, there's humility in this. And so you got that. We talked about that last week. I don't want to spend too much time here, but what I do want to ask is, let's be just frank with one another. Some of us have allowed Satan in our home. We made decisions 5 or 6 or 7 years ago that has set the course of our marriage, our parenting, and it's ruined us. And for some of us, we have a ton of regret. But some of us, we just make excuses of why he stays where he stays. And it doesn't matter how many times our wife or our husband talk to us about it. It's our pet. And we tolerate it. It's going to ruin you. And it's ruined people around you. And so let me tell you this before I move on. God is not a God of shame. He's not a God of guilt, false guilt. He's a God of freedom. He's a God of second chances and third chances and fourth chances. And so whatever that may be in your life, I'm asking you today to not allow Satan to have a stronghold any longer. All right? Let me move on to the next part, because this is what the message is really about. I just wanted to rehash that because it flows well. Turn back to 2 Corinthians for me, chapter 4. It says, in their case, the God of this world has blinded the minds of unbelievers. And this is why he did it. We didn't talk about this last week. To keep them from seeing the light of the gospel of the glory of Christ, who is the image of God. So what he wants to do, and this is why he blinds our eyes, is because he doesn't want you to see the beauty of Jesus. Right? That's what it always comes down to, is when we're lured with the sin, it's either is Jesus more beautiful than this desire, or is this desire more beautiful than Christ? And so what Satan's constantly trying to do is get your eyes off Jesus. Get your eyes off your dedication for Christ, your love for Christ, your commitment to Christ. And he's trying to lure you away from what really matters. Look, from the day you were saved, the day you gave your life to Jesus, have you not been under a constant attack of trying to lure your affections away from him? And so what he wants to do most, especially to unbelievers, is that they can't see the beauty of Christ. And for all of us, hopefully in this church, we've had a moment where you saw the beauty and it changed you. Right? You just like, God, you would save me? You love me? You'll forgive me? You died on a cross for me, and you made a movement towards an altar. You made a movement towards a conversation. You made a movement towards a commitment. And you saw the beauty of Jesus. And constantly, Satan, what he's trying to do is blind you from that moment where you saw the glory of Christ. And so, this is why he tries to blind us. And I see it all the time in churches, how he tries to take us off the beauty of Christ, and we get bogged down in secondary issues that don't matter. right? Style of worship. We can go down the line, all these secondary issues that come to the forefront where church fights begin to happen. It takes us off the main goal. I see people all the time getting wrapped up in myths and prophecy. We see false teachers in the pulpit all across the country preaching a different gospel. They go off that Jesus is enough. By faith alone, through grace alone, by Christ alone, that he died on the cross as a propitiation for my sin and your sin, and that's enough. We add the social gospel to it, right? It's another gospel. You have to do this, a works-based gospel. Like you have to do all of these sacraments, all of this in order to gain God's approval. Now we got a strong push for prosperity gospel where God is, if you come to God, he'll give you health, wealth, and prosperity. And so these false teachings begin to infiltrate the church and we move off the mark of, I don't need my health. I don't need wealth. I don't need prosperity. He's enough. I don't need to change the world. That's his job. And so we have all these things that deter from it. And so how can the light be turned on? You guys have to hear me out on this. So Paul's making a statement. People are blind. You need to be a doctor and give them their eyesight. This is what he's saying. Flip the light switch. How can they hear without a preacher? Right? How can they know without a preacher? God sent us. If he was done with you, you wouldn't be here. He sent you and me in order to share the gospel with the people we love the most. To walk in and turn the light switch on. And hope that God shines a light in their heart so that they can see his glory. I've heard so many people say, can we pray for revival? You know where revival starts? With you. We got about 400 people in this church now. If all 400 of you for the next year say, I'm committed to sharing the gospel with this person. And they come to know Jesus as their personal Savior because you've prayed and you've pleaded with God and you've turned the light switch on and they see the magnificence of Jesus. That means this church will be responsible in 1 year to 400 salvations and most likely 400 baptisms. What about next year in 2025? If those 800 people take the calling seriously, one person all year, you're investing in. Now what are we at? 1,600. In 2 years, 1,600 people, plus the 400, that's 2,000 people would have been saved and baptized. What if we go into year 3? All 1,600 people. Now we're at 3,200. You want revival in New Smyrna? Instead of driving down Flagler shaking your head and say our world's messed up, why don't you engage? Why don't we find out why they're drinking so much? Why they're running to the bars on Friday night? What in their life's leading them to that? Instead of wagging our finger and shaking our heads. We're good at that, aren't we, church? We're not so good at the engagement part. Why instead of saying my neighbor's just, why don't we just try to change that? And engage in their life in a way where maybe you're the only voice. Maybe you're their only friend. Maybe you're the only one that reached out because they lost their husband 20 years ago and they're just bitter at life. You want to turn the light on? We can't create the electricity, but we can turn the switch on. Look what verse 5 says. For what we proclaim is not ourselves, but Jesus Christ as Lord. Paul's critics were saying, Paul, you're just promoting yourself. This is about Paul. And Paul's like, it's not about me. It's about Jesus. What I love most about this is Paul saying, it's not up to my credibility to lead someone to Christ. My knowledge, my abilities, my power, it's all about him. And so this is the thing that happens all the time. And I need you to hear me out, because church is a real thing in a lot of people. Like, here's the deal. You can go out of this sanctuary and talk nonsense about me. That guy's a lunatic. What's wrong with him, right? Why is he always yelling? And you can get in the car and run your mouth about me. You can go in small groups, run your mouth about me. You can send me a harsh-worded email or call the church or do a Google review, whatever you want to do to come out me. But you know what the beauty of it is? It's not about me. And he uses broken people all the time to proclaim the gospel. And that's why he wants to use you and me and all of the individuals in New Smyrna and the uttermost parts of the world to say, hey, we don't proclaim ourselves. We just proclaim Jesus. So they can say whatever they want about us. We don't preach ourselves. We preach Jesus. And some of you have been hurt by a Christian. I get it. It's a deep hurt. Someone who said they walked with God. Take your eyes off them. Satan used them probably to create massive scars in your life. I get it. We're not preaching about them. We're preaching about Jesus and him alone. Is Jesus who he says he is? Has he done what he said he would do? Has he died on the cross and broken the chains? We're not fixated on some figure or individual or all these, televangelists and all of these individuals. We're focused on Jesus. And that's what Paul's saying. We preach it simple. We don't entertain. We don't bend to itching ears. We just preach Jesus. But we don't just preach Jesus. We preach him as Lord. Jesus Christ as Lord. And this is where I think a lot of people miss it. If Jesus is Lord, this is what it means. He's God. He has all authority in heaven and on earth. And we have to commit ourselves to obey him. It's not hey, I'm raising my hand to give my life to Jesus and me and him are friends and, I'm going to do my thing and he does his thing. Paul's saying, when we proclaim Jesus, we proclaim him as Lord. So you may not agree with something in the 66 books. It doesn't matter. You're not God. And so when we come and we proclaim Jesus, we say we bow our knee to him. We give him full reign in our lives. But we're not just proclaiming him as Lord. Look what he goes on and says. We're his servants for Jesus' sake. What's a servant? He does what his master tells him. This is what our master's telling us to do. Go into the wilderness, like Isaiah 42-3, and prepare the way for the Lord and make straight the desert highway for our God. God's telling us to use our mouth. That's not the miracle. The miracle is that he would use us, a broken person, to proclaim the gospel. Are you willing to do that? And then 6, for God who said, let light shine out of darkness, has shown in our hearts to give light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ. So there's this phraseology that he's using in 6 where it's the same light that God shined on the earth when it was completely dark, that he does that in our hearts. That God came in, and it's not that we desired God, but God came in some moment and took a light and shined it in our dark hearts and said, hey, look how beautiful and magnificent I am. And all of a sudden we saw God's glory and his beauty. He did the light shining in our dark hearts. It doesn't mean that we didn't have any action of response. What it means is that God did the work to lighten our dark hearts. And that's what we need. And that's why I tell you all the time to get in your devotions, to get on your knees. You need God to come in with his word and shine a light in your dark heart. And light up for the glory of God and say, man, he's magnificent. And so this is where I want to spend the rest of the morning, because when I think about God shining a light in my dark heart, there's just nothing but gratitude and mercy that he did that. And this is what Paul says. He realizes what God had done on the Damascus Road. And he says this, and we're going to spend the rest of the morning here. But we have this treasure in jars of clay. What's the treasure? The gospel. The glory of God. But he says this, we have it in jars of clay. I was messing with Bill Ray, the men's ministry, and I said, this is what we should call our men's group, Jars of Clay. But when I look at 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 7, what it tells me is this. It's beautiful. It should be our life verse, honestly. It's not about us. That we're simple jars of clay. And Paul understood this. Look, Paul has been attacked. And when we look at 2 Corinthians, he's getting attacked from every angle. Some commentaries say that they made fun of the fact that he was a hunchback because he had been beaten so many times. They say his eye was so distorted that he couldn't make eye contact with you because he had an eye disease that was gross. He was somewhat of a hideous creature, they almost describe him as, some commentators. We don't know. But the fact is that he had been beaten so many times that he wasn't an intimidating presence. And so what they say is, Paul's not powerful. He's not strong. They say he's not a good speaker, a good orator, right? Like he has a hard time communicating his thoughts. He lacks charm and power. Like, are you really following Paul? And this is Paul's response to this. His defense is this. You're right. What? You're right. I'm not strong. You're right. I'm not a good communicator. You're right. I'm not the most intelligent. I'm simply a clay pot. So here, I made a joke in first service. Whenever you bring a complaint to me about something with Beachside, this is my response from here on out. What do you expect? I'm a clay pot. Like, it's the best defense I've ever heard. Paul's like, what do you expect? I'm just a mere mortal man. I'm a clay pot. There's nothing grand about me. There's nothing magnificent about me. I'm a priceless treasure in a clay pot. I have a priceless treasure in me, but I'm a clay pot. He says this in 1 Timothy 1. I thank Christ Jesus. Listen to the humility, our Lord, who strengthened me because he considered me faithful enough and he put me into service. This is what he says in Timothy. I'm so thankful that God said he would use me. He would use me. This isn't foreign to us as we study the Bible, right, Moses? God, me? I can't speak. You got to pick someone else. My mouth is all jacked up. I killed somebody. I have an anger problem. You can't use me. You can't send me back. They know I killed an Egyptian. What are they going to do to me? He didn't take a photo of himself and throw it all over social media and say, look at me. Look what I'm doing. I'm hanging out with Pharaoh. No, he didn't do that. He was humble. He didn't think much of himself. He understood he was a clay pot. And God used him to bow the most powerful knee of the most powerful man on earth. Gideon. Do you know that story in Judges? God shows up to him in a vision. He's like, are you talking to me? Yeah, mighty warrior. Well, pardon me, God. Me? Yes, you, Gideon. And he goes, I'm the weakest of my entire tribe. No, you're a mighty warrior. We don't agree. We're going to agree to disagree. I need some type of sign. Right? And we can go down the line. David. A shepherd boy. A shepherd boy. Everyone's laughing when he goes out to face Goliath. A man who commits adultery, right, comes up with an evil scheme to kill a man and then kills a man. Right? Terrible father. But man, he repented. He was a man after God's own heart, and we sing his psalms still today. Right? Who else do we need to look at? We can talk about Isaiah, who literally says, I'm a man of unclean lips. I got a potty mouth. You can't use me, and the entire nation has dirty mouths. God cleanses his mouth, and he goes, here am I, send me. We can look at Elijah, right? God does a mighty work in Elijah on the Mount of Carmel. Really bows the knee of all of the priests of Baal and brings fire from heaven. And then Jezebel comes after him and he gets fearful and he goes, hides under a juniper tree. Running, like crying, whining. He's whining. Woe is me. And God comes to him still in a still small voice. We need to talk about Peter cursing, making oaths that he doesn't know Jesus, correcting Christ on numerous occasions, arrogant as all arrogant, prideful. But God uses him at Pentecost to start the church, and 3,000 people get saved and baptized. God could have used the intellectual Egyptians, right? That had the massive library in Alexandria. He could have used an Egyptian. He could have used a Greek philosopher from Greece who were well known in all the world. He could have used a powerful Roman leader to spread the gospel. He chose 12 men who are broken vessels. The question is why? Look, it tells us. It's a causative phrase, to cause, to show that the surpassing power belongs to God and not us. Why did he use them? Because he didn't want the people to notice the clay pots. He wanted them to notice what was inside the clay pots. See, I believe today he's still passing over the intellectual elite, and he's choosing people like us. He's not choosing celebrities who have an influence on culture. He's choosing humble men and women, and we see that often, who don't preach ourselves, but preach Christ. So what is this clay pot that I speak of? Describe it to me. It's just baked clay. That's what it was. It was simply baked clay. In the first century, they used this baked clay for sewage, or for trash, or for planting, or for any type of thing in their house that they needed something to store it in, right? It was worth pennies. But the thing about a clay pot that we know, if you've ever been in one, they're common, they're breakable, they're replaceable, right? They essentially have very little value. They're disposable. The longer and older they are, they begin to erode. They're cheap. But sometimes these clay pots were used for valuable goods and documents. You see the idea of the man coming into a field and finding a treasure in the field, and he buries it. He most likely buried that treasure in a clay pot. That's what they would do. But there's a cool illustration all the way back in 1947. There was this Bedouin shepherd boy. And he lost his sheep, and he was going through the mountainous terrain in Jerusalem. And he comes up to a cave, and he's looking for a sheep. And he takes a rock, and he throws it in the cave, and he hears a crash. Being a shepherd boy like he is, curious, has nothing really to do. He crawls down in the cave, and when he gets in the cave, he finds these huge clay pots, taller than him. Curious, he begins to open each clay pot. Some of them were already open. And he finds the Dead Sea Scrolls, which is the book of Isaiah. Right? Some of those clay pots, in them they had these scrolls wrapped in linen. Others were blackened to the point where they're unreadable. But he found a massive treasure that became invaluable to a point where now it's in a museum with literally the museum looks like a clay pot. And people travel all around the world to read these manuscripts. This is us. We're the clay pots. No one has probably pictures of the clay pot. They have the manuscripts in the museum. That's the thing that's valuable. And so what Paul is saying in this, he's saying, you charge me to be insufficient. I'm guilty. I'm not a good communicator. Guilty. I'm weak. Guilty. What you think is my weakness disqualifies me. But it's actually part of my credentials. It's who I am. We'll see later in 2 Corinthians, he said, in my weakness, God is made more powerful. What bothers me most about the American church, and even myself, I spend a lot of time wrestling through this, is we're just arrogant. And I'm not talking just to men, I'm talking to you women too, all of us. We just mask it differently. Every single person in the sanctuary this morning struggles with pride. And we go into small groups and we give little bits and pieces. What are you struggling with? Pride? That's not a small sin. It's destructive. And it destroys us. And so many of us lack humility. We think the world's about us. It revolves around us. that we're sufficient. How many times have you tackled life and said, I got this? How many of you times have you approached a situation and say, I'm perfectly capable of handling this? Right? How many times have you walked into work thinking that you're the smartest person in the room? That job couldn't function without you? We have a problem with pride. And when I was thinking yesterday at how many places in life I've let pride creep in, how many moments I've been prideful and allowed it to get the best of me, how many things in my life do I do by myself essentially saying, I'm sufficient? How often do I approach a situation and say, I'm just a clay pot? How often do we approach parenting? I'm just a clay pot. Right? How many times do children approach their parents? My parents are just clay pots. I can't put them up here. They're going to mess up just like I do. See, we have a massive problem with pride. And Ezekiel says when he saw a vision of God, he fainted. And John, when he sees a vision of the glorified Christ, he lays down and perceives to be dead. Paul's saying, go ahead and say whatever you want about me. Accuse me, go ahead. Mock me, mock my speech, mock my weaknesses. It's all true. I'm the chief of all sinners. I'm worthless. But I contain something so magnificent in me. If you would just look past it all, you would see Jesus in the gospel. You want to be used by God? Make this your life verse. Isaiah 66:2. But this is the one to whom I will look. God says, this is the one I look at. He who is humble and contrite in spirit and trembles at my word. Everything we have is a gift from God. Your mental capacity, your abilities, your money, your resources. He just put it in your clay pot. How dare we? How dare we think of something that lift ourselves up in a way that we should never be lifted up? And you guys know it. You know you have pride all in your heart and your soul and your mind. You know it. You know you have pride when you deal with your husband at times or your wife at times or your children at times. And you react. We should be the most humble people who walk the face of the earth. Because we're clay pots. And this is why we're clay pots, and I already touched on it. To show the power belongs to God. No one should have to ask where our power comes from. It's evident. See, the weakness of us, it doesn't limit the gospel at all. Our weakness actually is essential to the gospel to be beautiful. And this is why I love testimonies. I love testimonies of people who say, I couldn't do it. I hit rock bottom. I was the prodigal son in the pigsty. I went to my father. Man, did he ever show me grace and mercy and love. Man, he threw a feast for me and he celebrated. He didn't even bring up my past. He just said, I'm just glad you're home. Can we get there, church? Where we see that it's all about him and not about us? While we're clay pots and fragile, I love verse 8 and 9. We're immovable. We're not ordinary clay pots. Let me read this to you, and I'm going to give you some illustrations. And this is awesome. We are afflicted in every way, but not crushed. Perplexed, but not driven to despair. Persecuted, but not forsaken. Struck down, but not destroyed. Like, even though we're clay pots, Paul's saying we're immovable. Here, my family, my wife's side of the family, they love going to Tennessee. They love it. But they do this little thing where they love going into these like little shops on the side of the road in Tennessee. Aaron, you know what I'm talking about. And they pull in, and I take my boys in, and it is just kind of like, no, I don't want to be here. Everything in here is fragile. I'm about to hand the person my debit card because I'm about to own this entire store. Like, it's clay pots, it's everything that the local people have made, but it's all fragile. It's beautiful to look at, but not with 4 boys. And so let me give you a hypothetical situation. This has not actually happened, but hypothetical situation. You go into one of those places, you all know what I'm talking about, and everything's fragile in that place. And my boys begin to take a clay pot and they begin to throw it back and forth to each other. And I look and I go, oh no, don't do that. And they both look at me and the clay pot hits the ground. But it doesn't break. It kind of rolls to a stop. And I look to see if anybody sees it. I realize they don't. I pick it up. I inspect it. It's good. Put it back on the shelf, right? I'm dishonest, I guess. But I turn and I go chase after Jaden. He's going after another clay pot. Well, when I look back, Justice grabs the clay pot and he decides he's going to punt it. And he grabs it and I have a hamstring, so I'm not going to lay that out. I have a hamstring tear. He punts it. It hits the back wall and I'm just watching it like in slow motion. When it hits that wall, I expect it to shatter into pieces, 1 million pieces. But it hits the ground and it doesn't shatter. I pick it up. I look at it and I ask myself, what is this made out of? This is supposed to be fragile. It's clay. What type of clay? So I go up to the clerk. What type of clay did they use? I don't know. Who's the potter? Right? Who's the potter? I want to know who the potter is. See, when people watch our lives, they should find it so perplexing because we're so resilient and we don't break easily. Even though we're fragile jars and Satan tries to shatter us with blow after blow of life, the observers watch us wondering, what were they baked with? What's inside of them? And it leaves them asking, who's the potter? Who is the potter that made this man and this woman? See, this is what Paul's saying. Look, we were afflicted in every way, but not crushed. Like everything was caving in on us. That's what the Greek's essentially saying. We're in such a tight place that we can't get out of, but we weren't crushed. I hate tight places. I'd be panicking when I look at this, right? But it didn't kill us. We made it. Then he goes on and says this, not only that, we were perplexed, but not driven to despair. He's like, we're at a loss of words. We're at a total loss, our wits' end. But we found a way out. We didn't lose hope. We still had the resource of God Almighty. We were persecuted, but not forsaken. This word persecuted means to be hunted like an animal. It's this idea of stalked, right? I don't know if any of you guys are hunters, but nowadays they cheat. They put feeders out and they stand in a deer stand and shoot it. Shame on you. If you were a real hunter, you'd go out in the woods and you would chase it down with your bare feet and your bare hands. But it's stalking, right? It's this idea of I'm hungry and I'm going to stalk my prey. Kind of like a lion. But look at this. But we weren't left behind. All right? I love that. We were persecuted, but God didn't forsake us. We were struck down, but not destroyed. This word struck down is actually my favorite word in this text because I think it is very descriptive. It's this idea, it has to do with like a wrestling or boxing terminology or a battle terminology where you strike someone with your sword and they hit the ground in defeat. Or you're fighting someone and you hit them with an uppercut and the lights go out and they hit the mat and they can't get up. It's like we were struck but not destroyed. And so let me give you kind of an illustration here. I've already described us in a spiritual battle. But when we were saved, we come into that spiritual battle, and it's almost like a fighter entering a ring, and you know, you're excited, and you have everybody on your side, and people are cheering you on, right? You got all those people who stood by you at baptism, all those people who, I'm saved, and they're like, I'm on your side, right? It's a powerful moment. You got your mom applauding, your dad applauding you, but then you get out on your own, right? You get in the ring. And I don't know if you love the Rocky movies. They're awesome. I recommend them. But the new one in 2014 with Creed, Rocky becomes the coach, right? And Creed's son decides he wants to become a boxer. He wants to prove himself. So he gets in the biggest fight of his life. This is us. I think it's a great illustration. And I think it's like the 7th or 8th round. And the guy just, boom, and then he comes up and hits him. And you see Creed he get hit in the face, and he falls on the ground, and lights are out. Like his eyes are shut, lights are out. And then there's this replay of his dad boxing when he was a boy. His mom there. His girlfriend, all the people who stood by himself. And Rocky's on the side going, get up! Creed, get up! D, get up! His girlfriend's scared, get up! He can't hear it. Right? And you know Rocky's about to throw in the towel because why? He didn't do it for his father, and his father died in the ring, right? Rocky reaching for the towel. He's like, Creed, get up. And all of a sudden, his lights go on. And he goes, stands up. Ref comes over. He beats the 10 count. He's like, you ready? His eyes swollen. The round ends. Rocky's sitting there in the corner, and he says, I'm going to throw in the towel. He's like, no, I need to prove myself. Don't do it. I got to do this. That's us. Like, right? We're in this ring, of life. And we're taking jab after jab. And there's times where it's just dark. Some of you feel like the bells constantly. Every morning you wake up, it's like the bell's ringing. Someone throw in the towel. I can't do it. I'm exhausted. I'm over this trial, right? But when we reach the end of ourselves, we see the beauty of God. And he speaks the gospel into our hearts, and we see the glory of him, and we see the eternal promises. And we're like, I can do one more round. But here is, Satan is the master of sucker punches. And oftentimes he hits you when you don't see it coming. He goes after the places that are your deep hurts, your deep heartaches, the places where is the most pain, and he tries to keep you down with regrets, with shame, with guilt. He tries to keep you pinned to the mat. He tries to tell you, hey, God's not here. He's not here. He doesn't love you. He doesn't care about you. He doesn't hear you. And oftentimes we kind of flounder on that mat. But the second part of this is, why don't we train intensely knowing that we're going to face a battle? We don't know when it's coming. We don't know how it's coming, but we know it's coming. We've lived long enough to know that there's going to be difficult times in life. So why don't we train in a way, right? Some of you are military. You don't train haphazardly and take these guys into war. Why? Because they'll die. And they'll put your life on the line. And so if we know we're going to a battle, and this is what I constantly preach to you, why are we not on these more? Why are we not in the 66 books more? Why are we not praying over our children, over our wives, over our houses? Right? It's just foolishness to not do any training to get into a ring and expect to win. And so that's why we have so many defeated Christians. It's because we don't take when things are really well seriously. We just want to jump in the ring. It'd be like me going and playing college football tomorrow. Like, I'm going to go and play for the University of Miami. Line me up, coach. I have a torn hamstring just playing with my boys. It's going to end poor for me. Right? You get what I'm saying? We need to be spiritual warriors. We don't compromise on it. There's too much at stake. So that when we have to go round for round, We know we're literally a broken pot, but we have a treasure and a promise and a hope of glory, and nothing discourages us. Nothing keeps us on the mats. Have you not learned in life more from tears and failures and your weaknesses than laughter and strengths? Right? Have you not learned in life more from just messing up royally? Has that not created the man you're supposed to be? I want to get crushed so down till there's no more Khalil left and it's only God. Because that's when he's going to do his most beautiful work. And some of you have been there, and some of you are there. God's working. Jeremiah 18, 3-6 says this. I love this picture. Jeremiah says, so I went down to the potter's house. I went on a little field trip. And there he was working on his wheel. And the vessel he was making of clay was spoiled in the potter's hands. It was ruined. It's just like us. We're just like, God, I can't anymore. Like, I'm completely broken. And he's like, just come here. He puts us in his hands and he begins to do what he does. And he reworked it into another vessel. And it seemed good to the potter to do. Then the word of the Lord came to me, O house of Israel, can I not do with you as this potter has done? Declares the Lord, behold, like the clay in the potter's hand, so are you in my hand. I know you messed up, Israel. Let me do what I do. Let me get the glory here out of your mess. Romans 9, 20 and 21, Paul says this, but who are you, O man, to answer back to God? Will what is molded say to its molder, why have you made me like this? Has the potter no right over the clay? That's a really hard verse for someone who's prideful. God, what are you doing? What are you doing right now? Paul's saying, like, who are you? You're simply a pot of clay. Let the potter do what he does. How many times in life have we done that with God? How many times in life have we got, move, I'm the potter. I got this. And we start molding our life how we want it. Right? And it's just breaking in our hands. I got it. God, no, not right now. Right? No, I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to make this sin right. Right? And you just take over. You're so prideful. And I'm so prideful. We just take over. We start molding it how we want to mold it. And God's like, I created you, man. I made your family. I made your wife. I made your kids. I gave you all your abilities. Why don't you trust me? Let me where I'm supposed to be. Give me the chair. Give me the wheel. And let me do with you as I choose to do. How many times you have to mess it up until you just give him the wheel? How many times you have to be broken till you just trust him? How many times you have to realize in life that you're not on the throne, that you're not God? Till you hand your life over to the supreme God. And what's so beautiful about all of this is all of our weaknesses make us qualified for ministry. All of our weaknesses make us fit to share the gospel. Because that's when God gets all of the glory. So all your pain, it's giving you an avenue for God to work in someone else's life. To speak in a way you could never imagine. In your illness, you approach it and say, I'm just a clay pot. Let God do what he chooses to do. And you become useful for God with those nurses and those doctors. But what's so beautiful about our clay pot is what we have inside. It's a treasure. It's a treasure. And until we see it as a treasure, till we see Christ crucified as a treasure, his blood as a treasure, we don't ever understand. And we think we're the potter. We are a prideful church. And it's sad. Shame on me, shame on you. May we be humble people. And trust him to mold us how he wants to mold us. Can you bow your head and close your eyes? I don't have to ask who's prideful in this room. I already know. But are you willing to kill your pride and let God be God? That's the question.